Hello, hi, and welcome back to the Just Edit That Out podcast. I'm your host, Fiadia, and today I'm joined by the illustrious F Games.
Illustrious.
Illustrious, that's a big word. Don't quite know the definition, but I'm going to act like I do. So, you know, today's been one very interesting week. I'm I'll kind of. Do you have anything interesting that happened to you, or is it just gonna be me?
No. Just
I figured. Um, so this week I started back in school. Um, Luckily, I worked I think it was like 12 or 13 days straight, and then I finally got like a 4 day break. So that was really nice, and I didn't have work the first day of class, so that was a real the first. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we started class on Tuesday. I don't know why my university decides to do this, but they've done it all the time. They'll start us on a Tuesday. Well, no, I remember why. Because usually the first day we start school the first day of the week, and for the freshmen, that's kind of like this big orientation. They kind of walk them around. They tell them about like you have these different programs, join these different clubs. So usually the first day is reserved for freshmen to get to know the campus and kind of where things are. And then they have a start Tuesday. But, I have a class that only meets on Monday. So it's just kind of like, we're out a whole week. So it's a little odd. I started Tuesday. I had two classes. One was okay, the other one was really boring. So I finished my classes and I went to the university bookstore to go buy my textbooks. And as I'm walking there, I run into one of my former roommates, and we're kind of talking. And he's in the same department as me, and he's like, "Yo, have you heard about this class? Because there's a meeting tonight, and I think you'd be interested. So come." And I was like, "All right." So the class was at 5, so I just came home. I did a few things. I worked on some homework, and um, what did I do? I Oh my goodness, sorry. I was trying to silence my phone. Um, so I worked on homework, and then 5 o'clock rolls around. So I go to the building, and I sit down, and I was like, okay, this is like an interest meeting, and then the professor comes in and he just starts handing out syllabi, and I'm like, this is not an interest meeting,
yeah.
this is a
It's a class.
class. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I should be in there here, because and then eventually my ex roommate shows up, and I was like, he sits down next to me and is like, dude, I thought you said this was an interest meeting. It's like, well, yes and no, it's an interest meeting and also the class. And what was
What
so
the fuck?
yeah, I was like, but again, my department is so small that, it doesn't get a lot of attention, or, it's not as, not attention, but it's not as, um, there's not as many people in it as, our nursing, uh, like our nursing department, our business, programs, or, it's one of the smaller departments at this university, if not the smallest. Um, so this class had 15 seats, but there was only like 7 or 8 people. So he's handing out this.
Oof.
He hands out the syllabi,
So
and
he'll know you're not in the class like as soon
yeah.
as.
So it's not like you show up in a lecture hall and it's like, oh shit, this is the wrong class. This is
Yeah.
like if you leave, it's like, all right,
It's
well,
obvious.
one of
Yeah.
five. There's now 4 people remaining. So, and what was, but the thing that I do love, and I kind of talked about this in the last episode, was just the intimate nature, and especially with this department, because you only have 15 people in a class max. It's more intimate, so we're working on this, and it's a lot easier. Because I remember in my editing class last semester, there was maybe like probably like 15 to 17 people in the class. we would all be able to work on our stuff, and then the instructor would be able to help us. Whereas if you had like this whole lecture hall, she can't help
It's
everybody.
not personal at all.
hmm
Dude.
And the one thing that I did really like about that class is we would we only did it towards the end of the class for some reason. We would do our edits, and then we would turn them in, and then the next time that we met, we would watch the edits, and we'd kind of give notes on what we thought, like what worked, what didn't work, and just have a moment of constructive feedback, which I really liked, which is very beneficial in, I would say, well, in any setting, but especially the art setting. So I show up to the class, and I'm already like, so he knows I'm not supposed to be here. Um, this just feels odd, but I'm just gonna sit through it. I'm thinking it's an interest meeting, so I'm thinking, all right, maybe 1 hour or something like that. But it ends up going, the whole class period, which is 2 hours and 45 minutes. But the thing was, you know, immediately, like, he starts talking about, like, we're gonna do this project, we're gonna do this project. But usually, like, whenever the first day they start talking about projects, it's overwhelming. But this was interesting because the class is live music recordings. So it's not like a music video, but it's like, you take their live. It's kind of like MTV's Unplugged, just a very amateur, you know,
Mhm.
people that don't really know what they're doing it. But it'll be interesting because that is something I am, like with the music career, especially in the metal scene. You have a lot of people do photography,
Yeah.
but you don't have like high quality live videos. And it'll
They're
be
always like GoPro or iPhone and
right.
shit.
And the audio is always the problem. So that's one of the things that it's, to me, it's gonna be an interesting class. It's gonna be a lot of work, but I'm ready. So basically, what I did was, we had the class, and I was like, okay, I enjoy this much more, even though it's gonna be a lot of work, especially a lot of work outside of class. Um, I'm going to enjoy this much more than, this other class that I'm taking. So I literally came home from the meeting, dropped that class, and then signed up for this class because that one class, it was kind of like a freshman seminar class.
Yeah.
And freshman seminar classes are good when you're a freshman because it's kind of like easygoing, not a lot of work, but still like a weird amount of work, a weird amount of dumb work, really kind of easy, annoying stuff. And so I was like, all right, I'm done with that class. I'll take it like over the summer or a different time, because I don't know when this class would be offered. So I added that class, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll just watch TV, finish up some homework, and then go to bed. But one of my friends texted me, was like, hey, you want to go see the new Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? And I was like, of course I would. Just because I was on like a recent binge of his movies, or at least his more recent movies. I watched Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards. Um,
I fucking love Inglourious Bastards, dude.
what the hell was the other one I watched?
Is it
The
those
Hateful
ones?
Eight.
Easily. Did you watch the extended edition on Netflix or the regular?
I just the regular one. I need to watch the extended edition.
It's like 6 hours long, dude.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Um, so I'll hopefully I'll work on getting my friend Killian on this podcast, and then we'll kind of talk about the more technical elements of films and shows that I've been watching. So we went and saw that. The thing was, he didn't get off work until 10, so the showing that we went to was at 10:15, and the movie is like 3 hours long. So we were like out until like 2,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my goodness, I am tired, but that was a good movie. And then I had to wake up at 10 the next morning. So it's a really good movie. I got to rewatch it, and then, I'll probably talk about that in a different episode. So, where was I at? And then on Wednesday was also a very interesting day because I had my first class started at 10. It's my writing for the screen class, so hopefully I'm going to be working on like my script writing or screenwriting abilities because, what I've found is just, I have the idea, I'm just lacking in trying to write it. So we're maybe about like 30 minutes into the class, and all of a sudden here, let me, this is kind of important. So the building that we're in is right next to this construction site on campus. So they're building a new, building for the nursing. They still have their old nursing building, but they're just building a bigger one, and it's newer, just because that's how big the nursing department is at my university. So, our building is very close to it, and I hear like 3 horn blasts, and I was like, all right, and I didn't think anything of it. And then I heard 3 more horn blasts, and, I was just like, okay, I don't know.
What the fuck? Yeah.
Because the last time I heard those blasts was when they were doing the clearing, like when they were blowing up the rock bed in order to put the foundation in. So I was like, I don't think they're about to blow something up because there's a lot of people around. It turns out while they were working, one of their excavators severed a gas line, and there was a gas leak. So, we're sitting in class in this building that's near the site, and then all of a sudden, one of the heads of our department just, knocks on the door, and it's like, yeah, there's a gas leak. We got to evacuate. And I was like, oh.
Yikes.
So my thing is, like, how far do you think you have to be away from a gas leak?
3 miles or so?
You would think, you would think a sizable distance. We literally went out of the building on the sidewalk next to the building. I'm like, we're still, it's like we're still in the vicinity. Yeah, I'm like,
if it blows up, it's going to attach to those particles.
Right. My thought is like, they at least got us out of the building because, it's closed space, so it's a lot easier to, be trapped in with the gas. But still, it's like, if something blows up, we don't have much protecting us. So, that whole, we stood outside for like, I don't know, like 20 to 30 minutes. And, it's the first day of class. So you're standing around with a bunch of these people you don't really know trying to make awkward small talk. Like, yeah, so what kind of movies do you like? Just making awkward small chit chat. And then, we finished that. And then that was like the majority of the excitement. It was just there was a gas leak, and they were like, "All right, get out of the building, but stand in this open air." And I was like, "All right." And then my second class of the day, I found out some of my university classes have been like this. They call it a hybrid class, where some days you meet in an actual classroom, and then other days you just have online work. So I found out that I only have to meet Monday and Wednesday, and then Friday I don't have to meet. And that is my only class Friday, so I don't have jack shit to do on Friday. Or, like, I don't have any classes to go to, so that's real nice. But, yeah, that's mostly just been my week. Just, joining a random new class,
Nice.
going to see the new Tarantino movie, and then almost being exploded. So, a pretty normal week. All within the first week. I don't know. So, hey, can you say seg for me?
Seg.
Way. All right, here we go. Next topic. All right, so we kind of mentioned I really have to figure out how to make my weekly debriefs brief, but who cares? There's just some interesting stuff. Um, so I kind of talked about this in the last episode, but uh, I figured we needed to start somewhere. So I'm trying to transition us into being able to review albums. I'm still working on how exactly we're gonna do that. So for this week, I kind of just said to F to pick out a few influential albums that he listened to, and I picked out a few of mine. So I guess I'll kind of get us started in the one that kind of I have a hard time picking favorites. So sometimes I can listen to this album minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, nonstop. But then there's some times where it's like I don't want to listen to this album for I'm just done listening to it. But kind of the first album that I guess I really got into in the metal genre was Fit for an Autopsy's sophomore album titled Hellbound. The main thing that drew me to it for the start was I really like a lot of the mastering. It was done by Will Putney. He's done several other albums. I think he owns his own studio. And he does a lot of the metal genre or like metal albums. And he's also one of the guitarists for the band. So, it's kind of like having someone in the band being able to make the album, someone is, they're more attached to the project. So that's, I guess that's kind of one of the reasons why I want to learn how to, mix or, record albums and whatnot, but I haven't had a lot of experience. Anyways, so, and, the way that I kind of picked out the albums when I was just getting into metal is I sometimes I'd listen to them on Pandora and find them that way, but I mostly would just go to a store and just pick out an album based on how it looked. And the artwork for Hellbound was done by Brian Mercer. I've looked at his work on Instagram and other places. He's done some other album covers. I don't really remember for which bands, but what I liked was it was more centered on the art piece. Like there's some where a lot of albums have really nice album artwork, but this kind of stood out to me because it kind of has like a traditional feel to it. It's like very saturated in colors. There's a lot going on to it, and it's complicatedly simplistic is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at it and you get the idea of it, but you can look at the finer details, which is also kind of how the album is. Because the one thing that I find whenever I'm trying, I try to work up how if I was in a band, how would I want it to sound. And kind of the one thing that is constant is like I like the nice bass heavy sound. I like kind of like not quite like doom metal, because doom metal is more just slow tempo, and it's very just kind of like one note. There's hardly any chords, but I like a nice kind of like deep downbeat of a rhythm. And then I like, guitar being in the background, or like, so, you have this nice heavy sound that carries you all the way through, but then, in the background you can hear just like, the guitar having, not like a solo, but doing something completely different. So, from whenever listening to rock, like, the bass mostly does the exact same thing that the guitar does. And what I like is whenever, you can hear each instrument doing its own thing. And, as I said, like I like a heavy sound, so whenever the bass, gets to, shine and do its own thing, I'm very much a fan of it. Like that was kind of one of my draws to Korn, just the fact that like you could hear the bass and it's a very distinct sound. Um, so there's a lot of different moments throughout the album that I really like, and I can't do it justice just talking about it. So a lot of these, you'll have to go and listen. What the hell was that? All right, whatever. A lot of these you'll have to go and listen to on your own. Hopefully you do, or hopefully you have. Um, and the other thing that kind of really drew me to this album was just kind of the lyrics, or the overarching sound, um, or the message. It was predominantly, this album talks about, we're on a mankind is hellbound because we're not taking good care of this planet Earth. Again, a lot of the themes I could try to talk about, but it's not too fresh in my mind. So again, your best thing would what, we'll make this like kind of like a trailer for the album. So we'll kind of sprinkle some nice details, make you enticed, and then hopefully you'll go listen to them. But metal's not everyone's cup of tea. So that was the first album that I had really gotten into. And the big reason, or how I got into music, was just the fact of, I prefer having a CD. I prefer having a physical copy, just because, back in the day, I didn't really have the ability to, I didn't have like a smartphone, so I couldn't play Spotify or Pandora. So, I had these physical copies. So, I'd have the CD in and I'd listen to the album over and over. And that's how, you can't really, I can listen to an album once, but that doesn't mean, I have everything I need to know if I like it or not. Because there's some albums I started listening to, and I didn't like them at all. But then after re-listening to them several times, I can come around to it because I pick up on more of like the finer details. And it being a 10-track album, it's very short and it's very easy to listen to. So like I listened to it a lot on the way to school, just because, driving to school, that'd be like half the album. Driving home would be the other half. So, doing that for a few days, I'd get to know it, and then I would change over to a different album. So, that, I would say that's probably like my top one. Again, I have a hard time picking favorites. There's times whenever I don't want to listen to it at all. But
I think that's the way everyone is with
mm-hmm. And my last note before I let you go into your kind of top one is, the other thing that really drew me to the album was just the vocals on it. Just because, I mentioned in the previous episode, I have a lower voice, as you can tell. And so, I hit more of the lower register whenever I personally do my own screams. So, his vocal range is similar to mine, and as I said, I kind of started off with metalcore, and that's more like the higher registered, hardcore, and like people would sing, and that was a genre I wanted to start in. But one, I couldn't really scream, and two, I could not sing, and or at least, I haven't found my singing voice, and especially because, it was a more, not falsetto, but, higher, it was higher in the vocal range. So I've since, found, kind of found my voice. So that was the main thing that kind of really drew me to that album, was just the fact that, I'd been so immersed in the metal genre, but I had now finally found an album that, I could, relate to the thematics. I really enjoyed a lot of the intricacies of the mixing. The artwork was nice, and just the fact that I could, practice my vocals to it, because, that's all I do in my car, to and from work, going home, going to a friend's house. I'll just crank the radio up and just, So those are kind of like, the main points that I kind of got from that album. So what is your what would be your number one album?
My number one would be Korn's self-titled '94 album.
Okay, all right. My first thought was I thought you were gonna go with Whitechapel, but Korn does make sense.
I listened to Whitechapel and I did listen to all their albums, but I didn't really resonate with me as
Right.
much. It was more so certain songs. There was like Father of Lies, This Is Exile,
Mm-hmm.
Murder Sermon, etc. That was more relatable. But as a full albums, it was a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
But Korn was just more raw, in my opinion.
Right.
I like that. Just because you could tell it was like a studio. It wasn't produced. It was literally just them. If they fucked up, they fucked up. Like they kept in the fuck ups, and I really liked that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure I don't remember what it was, but yeah. Okay, so I listened to that not too long ago. I'll let you go into it, so I stop interrupting. But um,
It was also just that when I was starting out with the vocals and shit,
mm-hmm.
that was more of what I was able to do at the time. And so I
Right.
could really like sing the lyrics and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it was just like I was bullied, so he was bullied. He's relatable.
Right.
Like that. It was just something I listened to over and over again and like was scream all the time.
Yeah, because the thing is, we both. I think I found Korn through Pandora, and whenever I was listening to them, I had just barely listened to them, and I remember my brother bought the "See You on the Other Side" album, and
Not a good album to start off with.
no, I mean I enjoy the album because, as I said, I listened to the album over and over again, but it's different to the rest. So I remember I went back and listened to their self-titled, and the one thing that I did like, as you said, it does, it feels like a home studio. You can hear it's not like it's not the highest quality. Which one is it? Is it Clown? I thought it was Clown. Clown is the one where they have like the whole, like minute before the song starts, where they're just like, "Well, how the fuck do we do this?"
Yeah. Yep.
And then they just
'Cause
left
you
it
can
in.
hear Monkey like just playing the bass for no reason.
Yeah.
And John's like, "You want to hear a track?" And he starts playing the riff to Twist, which they hadn't put on a track yet, and it was just like an inside joke.
Yeah. So was there any like tracks that really stood out, or parts that really stood out to you of that album? Mr. Fortnite Gun Battle Man goes silent.
Sorry. This is like,
Is that really what's happening right now?
yeah, literally, I got into an intense battle.
The fourth episode in, and this man, like, this is why he's silent half the time, because he's still playing Fortnite. All right, so I guess I'll kind of, I think the first album that I heard off this, not the first song I heard off this album was "Shoots and Ladders."
Oh yeah, because it was
Yeah, it
very
was
like
nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of nursery rhymes.
And it had bagpipes in it, and like everyone went
Yep.
fucking crazy. They're like, bagpipes and metal? What?
Yeah, that was also kind of like the odd thing. It's not just the fact that they have bagpipes; it's the fact that John also plays the bagpipes.
Yeah.
So it's not like they hired somebody out to like, oh, let's
he knew how
put
to do it,
bagpipes
yeah.
in this one episode. It's like such a very niche instrument to know how to play. And I guess what I really like was, as you said, the one thing that I've kind of been working on recently with my vocals is, like, obviously I have the majority of my lows and gutturals down. For anybody that's not too familiar with that's the lower register. It comes deep from the diaphragm, and it's just, very heavy in tone, kind of, it's a lot of tenseness. How's it going? Hiya. But one of the other things that I've kind of been working on is, trying to work on my mid-range, which is just kind of like, again, like I tried doing highs for the longest time, but I kept hurting my voice doing it that way. But, I'm working on my mid-range, just kind of like, about this level of tone, just with, rasp, or like the screaming nature to it. And kind of with that has been, I would call it more like talking screaming. I don't really know the technical term, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's
JD
what I
does it a
call it.
lot. But
Mhm.
it's very like the gritted teeth. There's a lot of
Mm.
it's more just kind of like forcefully talking through gritted teeth, like, so help me
That's
God,
basically
if
the
you
warm
don't
up
get in the
for.
fucking chair, I'm gonna beat you.
Yeah, it's basically like the intro, not the intro, but like warm up for what most people use to growl. That's
Yeah,
how.
yeah. So a lot of the kind of
Very new metal, very
yeah, it's
hardcore.
very. I'm trying to think of like, I know this one band, Filth, does it at times. Dustin's vocals are over the place. So he has a lot of he can do highs and he can do lows, but their band is more focused on, I guess, kind of like doom metal. Have you seen Filth? Yeah, or have you at least heard
I
of
haven't
them?
seen them, but I remember we listened to them for like a hot month. Thought
Yeah.
they were the shit.
Um, I still enjoy them. I've been listening to their albums in the car, as I said. But a lot of the things that I'm trying to do is you have all of these albums. To me, and that's kind of what this episode is about. Is just talking about, I guess, the most influential albums that kind of helped shaped how I would like to create music. Because one of the things that I always saw. Coming up in this genre is you would see people that would start bands and it'd be like four fans of this band, this band, this
Yep,
band, this
yep.
band. And it makes sense to pull from all those sources, but at the same time, they basically just sound like that band. Or people, there's times like, whenever I make a movie, I would like to be as popular as Tarantino. I would like to tell a movie as great as
Mhm.
Tarantino. But, if I try to make a Tarantino movie,
It's not gonna look right.
it's not going to look right. And Tarantino's already out there making movies, so why would somebody want
No
to
point in
watch
trying to
me
beat
make a
him.
Tarantino
Yeah,
movie when they could watch
yeah.
Tarantino make a Tarantino movie?
Apparently, his next movie, by the way, is supposed to be his last one. Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing that I kind of like focus on with either like making films or music is not to like somebody can put out their 15th studio album. Some of them like the albums are really great, but for me it's I'm a perfectionist, and it's a big hindrance in trying to be productive. But Tarantino spends so much time working on his movies.
Mhm.
Bands take time to work on their albums, and I want to be able to do as much work as I can, and build up anticipation, because like you can go on a 3-year hiatus working on a project, but then as soon as it comes out, everybody hates it. So a lot of it is I'm just want to work on constantly perfecting the craft, because and the only way that you can really do that is by allowing other influences. Because whenever I first started, it's like, well, I don't want to watch like a movie and then basically just try to make that movie. But at the same time, or like listening to an album, you can find this part that you really like, but you do it a different way. So you take the idea, but you know do it differently, and that's kind of the whole point. Is like there's only so many stories out there, but you kind of have to shape it just a little bit differently. And that was a big tangent away from our main albums, but that's kind of, yeah, as I said, like these albums are most influential to us in like me especially, trying to go into the music production, or like just making music with a band, or producing albums, is just trying to learn from the good, you learn from the bad. You have to take everything. You can't just watch only the good movies. You have to watch bad movies, because there's also something to learn there too. So kind of getting back on topic, I would say probably my second most influential album was Within the Ruins' 2014 release, Phenomena. So again, uh, like Hellbound, I bought the album on a complete whim. I just liked the artwork. I remember I saw it in a Best Buy before, as I was getting into uh, the genre, but I didn't buy it until a few months later. And I remember, I listened to that album. I probably got it I think it was my senior year of high school. That's whenever I listened to it the most, because I remember, at that time my car had a busted AC unit, so like it was leaking. I think it was the Freon. So what I had to do a lot was I had to drive with my windows down, and I was like, all right, well, if I can't hear over the sound of the wind, so I'm going to turn the album up. So that's kind of that's also kind of one of the things that really got me into focusing on the bass of songs. It's just the fact of I have a good sound system in my car, so I'd turn the bass up, and just playing it so loud, you can feel, like you have the thud of the music just kind of reverberating around you or through you. And as I said, having a lower voice, I guess it's kind of, it kind of resonates with me, just having this kind of deep feeling just kind of rattling you. I don't really know if that means anything, but you got thoughts, Mr. Silent? Or are you still playing Fortnite?
Obviously, I don't have any thoughts, or I would have said anything.
Yeah. He's a great active listener. He is.
Yeah, so thank you.
But as I kind of said about the Hellbound album is, whenever I like the really kind of bass heavy sound that carries through, but Within the Ruins they're more technical, so they have a lot of I don't really know
mathcore shit.
Yeah, so it's technically classified under mathcore. Mathcore is the more, well, mathcore is kind of like a subgenre of technical death metal, because tech death metal is just a very fast time signature. There's a lot of blast beats, which is typically done by a double pedal on the bass drum. So you have this very fast tempo, and then the guitars are also doing like sweeping 16th notes, and they just have very fast melodies. And what I liked about it is just the fact it can be so intricate, but it's also very simple to follow. Whereas like certain other genres of metal are just more, they all have their own merits to an extent, but I find I like being able to, I like music that has a bit of a melody to carry through it, because some of the music that I have listened to before, you can listen to it and it's more vocal led rather than track led, and I like being able. I think you should be able to remove the vocals and it still be a piece of music, and not obviously it's going to sound a little different, but it shouldn't sound too different, because the instrumentation is its own work of art, and then the vocals is a different work of art added on top of it. And that's just how I personally approach music. Not to say I don't like music that's mostly vocally led. It's just I prefer it the other way. So, what would be probably your second album?
My second album?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard.
All right. Well, I'll kind of throw an album out for us, because I know it was very influential to both you and I. It's a little album called Soulless Hymns by The Last 10 Seconds of Life.
Very.
I
said very true.
Yeah. So this album came out in 2015. It was the last album that the band put out with their former vocalist Storm Strope. We miss that dude. He's just been, I don't know, he kind of like left the band, and he's just been living life. I guess he was just kind of done. But you know, kind of one of the first song that I heard off that album um, was "North of Corpus." I remember it came on when I was listening to it.
5 inches from the sun.
Spilling out at both ends, feeling like a dead man. I need to know what those lyrics are right after, because I swear to God he says I see titty, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's not talking about seeing.
Definitely not what those lyrics are.
But
He's
if
talking about seeing the end of the world.
well, yeah. And again, you know, the biggest thing that I liked about the album was a lot of the lyrics, and you know, this album is influential, you know, in my stance, because I remember as soon as I heard North of Corpus, I went and listened to the rest of the Soulless Hymns album, and the thing that stood out to me, as I said, like I've been working on kind of like my mid-tone register of screams. You know, he has Storm has this very, you know, it's kind of mid-tone. He has some lower notes at times, but as I said, it's kind of more like the storyteller voice, where it's just kind of through gritted teeth, but not quite.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of solid tracks on it.
It's because his vocals are so good.
Yeah.
And the music was so well produced, even though they didn't have much to work with.
Right.
It was just really, it was very relatable for us specifically, because that's what we were trying to do. Because they recorded it where, like, someone's basement, right?
Probably
like
something
in like
that.
a shitty studio, and they just worked on it really well and learned everything they needed to do to make it sound better than
Yeah.
what they recorded it.
And see, that's the kind of thing that, you know, I've been keeping in my mind recently, and I've probably mentioned it in the past. You know, the idea is what's more important rather than the equipment. So, you know, it is nice to have a well-produced album, but at the same time, it's like, so long as you're working on building the idea, because obviously it's going to take you time to, you know, get that perfectly mastered album, but so long as you just keep doing it, you're working on practicing forming the craft. So kind of like with this, you know, this podcast, for example, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. I'm only 4 episodes in, but, you know, with you know, time, I can be able to figure out how to, you know, better run the show. Or, you know, with music, it's like, you know, people progress. You know, it's all just one big learning process. You know, I've made, like, kind of talking about my film career, I've made 3 films, or 3 short films at this point. First one was horrendous. Second one was better because I had somebody that had a nice camera and did a majority of the cinematography. And the third one, I helped with the cinematography, but it was this other guy's complete idea. But, you know, each time I find, you know, what worked, what didn't work. And as I said, you kind of have to listen to good and bad albums. You have to watch good and bad movies. You have to read good and bad books, because you learn something to see, all right, this is what I can do to make it better, and this is what I should avoid doing. So there's always something to learn, because, you know, you could listen to an album, you can be, all right, well, maybe the flow wasn't quite right. Maybe, you know, it was poorly mixed. You can do a little research to figure out, you know, how they did it. And a lot of it is just, you know, taking a step back and looking at, you know, what you have in front of you objectively. You know, so you can be overwhelmed by, like, oh, I really like this movie, but objectively, you know, it's a bad movie. But, you know, it all really depends. And as I said, I guess this whole kind of podcast idea is just a way to document my thoughts, because Lord knows I don't have a diary. And, you know, it's easier to talk it through with a Fortnite playing idiot, or hopefully another film fanatic and possibly a psycho lunatic business politician. So, you know, I don't really. You have anything else? Because I realize I just built us into a random ending, but yep. Psych, that's not the end of the episode. I got some more stuff to talk about. So, and, you know, as I kind of mentioned with the the artwork. The other thing that kind of stood out with Soulless Hymns is just the artwork or the album
Yeah,
art, just because it's
so
literally
vivid.
just it's like the Mojave Desert with a bright blue sky, and then it's just a red skeleton.
That was it. So wasn't there a chair, like a beach chair or something?
No, I'm fairly certain that was like it was just that simple. So what was I'm trying to think of like what was another kind of prominent album for us, because I think that was
I don't
probably
know
the
if it hit
most.
you as hard, but Acacia Strain's what was it? The beat?
um
It was the blue one,
yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Wormwood. That one
Yeah,
hit me a
Wormwood.
lot.
I The thing is, for as much I've listened to, a decent portion of the Acacia Strain, but as I said, I haven't really sat down with their material before. And like as I said, I kind of listen to albums in passing, or like I'd listen to them, on shuffle. So I've heard, several different songs, but I've never like fully sat down with their work. Um, and as I was talking, I kind of thought of just kind of like another one of a more influential album for us. I don't I don't think I would take my music in this direction, but there is like some techniques that I follow through, and it is the second album by Infant Annihilator called the Grandivola Elysium, I believe.
Yeah,
Um,
the Grand Evil Elysium.
yeah, and that again, this album, it's I would say not quite similar to Within the Ruins, but it is in like the technical metal subcategory or the
Yeah,
subgenre. And kind of the one thing that uh, you know stood out to me was just the vocal range of their vocalist Dickie Allen. He'll have has these like very deep lows and these very high highs, and just the pure kind of like even the first album, Unholy Grave, or the first track, Unholy Grave Birth, he it starts with like this big kind of orchestral sound, and then you hear like a baby crying, and it starts coughing, and then it slowly becomes like this sadistic, satanic snarl, and it's just kind of like, all right, what the fuck am I listening to right now? I don't like, I just watched a baby transform, but I'm gonna keep listening. Um, and there's just a lot of technical parts, and the thing is with each song, so like you have the songs, as I said before, they have different ideas that they carry, but one of the things that I do like in the metal genre is there's times whenever the tempo or beat will shift mid song. It's typically popular amongst like the hardcore genre, and it's called like down tempo. So you'll be going at, let's say, like 80 beats per minute, and then all of a sudden, like, there's no like real transition. It's just you just stop playing, and then all of a sudden now you're at like 120. So a lot of it just
mhm.
like a tempo shift, and I can enjoy that. And there's when it's really good is whenever it goes from like this fast pace, and you can listen to it slow down, and then that's whenever like the breakdown comes in, and then you have to survive the pit and not get brutally
Destiny.
beaten by
Yeah.
a stray elbow or something along those lines. So as I said, like and like as I was talking about the artwork, like if you look at the artwork of the Grandival Elysium, it's this very it's this like deep. It's all purple. It's like this very deep purple, and there's like a lot of different intricacies, but it's more. I wouldn't relate it to like a Renaissance painting, but there's it's one big piece, and there's kind of like a lot to look at, and obviously it took a lot of time. Um, but as I said, I kind of like more, I can appreciate it, but I prefer like, I like more simplistic things, or like it can be intricate so long as it, kind of has a simplistic
So
feel to
we
it.
have the wrong name.
Maybe we
Also,
have
they came out They're about to come out with a new album on September 11th.
Yeah.
It's called the Elysian Grandival Galeriarch.
Oh yeah.
The next album is called The Battle of Yalda Boao. I don't fucking know.
That's the other thing that um is kind of odd about that certain branch of genre is like, once you get some more of like the um deathcore talks more, or I guess more like deathcore, death metal, um technical death, blah blah blah, so forth. A lot of the subject matter that is covered is more fantastical. It's more kind of,
Fantasy shit.
like
Even if it's brutal.
yeah, like Oceano. Like even uh, I didn't. I only the thing is I only just recently started listening to more of Oceano's discography, and there is their third album, Contagion, that I listened to more. Just because at that point it's their third album, so they've gotten better at producing, or they found a better producer, and like the kind of the subject matter. But like the whole album is kind of talking about the planet in this decayed state and the human race dying off of this disease, and then at one point you have what is it? Like one of the songs is called "Weaponized," and it's talking about how I don't remember if it's either the people that have become infected or the infection was weaponized, but basically, it's kind of it's kind of like the sci-fi of the music genre, because it explores these kind of darker themes. Like again, like I mentioned before, the Monolith of Inhumanity by Cattle Decapitation. That album is kind of talking, like even that the artwork for that album is the rapid de-evolution of mankind back into like monkeys. So like the person in the farthest foreground of the album is literally ripping his face off and like revealing like a chimp's face, and it is kind of grotesque, but at the same time it's kind of like an interesting exploration of these different I guess ideas, because as I said it's more fantastical, so it's open to more I guess exploring subject matter while kind of talking about you know deep rooted themes, because like Contagion, or their most recent album, what was Revelation, or Oceano's Revelation, it's kind of talking about the destruction of the planet, but at the same time we have these alien overlords that are like coming to the planet being like, you guys really just fucked up. Like, we left you here for 20 days and you fucked everything up.
Yeah.
What is that? And what was funny was I don't remember if it started with their Ascendance album, but Ascendance came out just before their most recent album, Revelation. And they have this whole alien meme, just because, especially with Ascendance, that was kind of where they brought in more of the themes of kind of like alien overlords kind of like ruling over Earth, and coming back to be like, man, you guys fucked all this shit up.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't quite say that Fit for an Autopsy is technical death. Again, a lot of it, I don't really like to we like to categorize, just in general. Everybody likes to categorize things like, like, okay, so you're a popular kid, you're a football player, we have all these different ways of categorizing ourselves that, we worry about labels too much at times. And I know this sounds kind of preachy, but, there's times whenever it's like, it's like, I just listen to metal. I don't specify a lot, but it's like it helps, like if you're trying to like look up, like you could look up tech death bands, but at the same time it's, I feel like it's just an over categorization of things, and sometimes it's just highly unnecessary, but again, to each their own. But it also is, it's kind of valid because it does, I guess, like as I said, it kind of helps you navigate it. but some people worry more about the terms rather than just, accepting an overarching idea. It's like I say I listen to metal, and through that I listen to very different types of metal. So like some people may say they listen to metal, and they could be talking about like the metal from the 1980s, like hair metal bands.
Hair metal.
So you have like Van Halen, you have Megadeth, Metallica, Black Sabbath. And while I have listened to them, like what I consider metal is different. So like in that category, it does make sense to have this subdivision, but at the same time, some people, they make, and again, it's just one person ruining it for the whole. One person could be like, essentially like gatekeeping, like this is the only type of metal that can exist. You can like, if you don't listen to this, don't call yourself a metalhead.
Yeah.
So
they're gatekeeping.
Yeah. So, and again, it's just one person ruining it for all. And I again, as I said, I like being able to subdivide because then you can make it easier to kind of, talk about it and talk about its elements. Like I said, like, deathcore kind of focuses on, these dark thematic elements of, just exploring, human nature in kind of a darker tone. But at the same time, there can be, for instance, there's a death metal band called Brojob. They have a lot of death metal elements. They have a lot of the instrumentation, the vocals, the tempo. But it's literally just some dude talking about blowing another guy. And then I don't remember a lot of their songs, but
we never listened to them. It was like funny for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. So, it was kind of like, again, they were mostly just kind of like this, meme that kind of spawned out of it because you have, this very intense, very technical music, but at the same time, but it's like, I'm going to tickle you, I'm going to come in your belly button, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, we thought they were the next Attila.
Yeah. And like, what was weird is they started off, they put out a whole album where they kind of did all of this, just talking about like homosexual sexual interactions, and immediately after they were trying to follow a more serious route, but their name is Brojob. They blew up from making this kind of parody type of metal. And then
same thing with Hunt the Dinosaur. Like,
yeah,
he's still talking about the same goddamn shit as he was in the first album. Like, it's like, come on, just if you want us to take you seriously, be more fucking serious. Like, you could be really good, but you're making it shit.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even kind of Attila did that with their.
They did that for a long time.
They did that with their Chaos album because when Franz, kind of first started the band, I don't know how many original members are remaining. But, when they first started, like, I only listened to the About That Life album. So, it kind of had this whole, they built this whole sense of like, oh, we're just going to get really fucked up. We're going to drink a lot of alcohol. We're going to smoke a lot of weed. We're just going to have parties. We're just going to fuck everything. And, I only really liked as I said, the About That Life album, just because, it had that theme to it, but at the same time, it was more mature because, when he started the band, I think he was like 16, and then, like, when they were making albums, he was still very young, whereas, like, at this point, he'd kind of matured, so, it's still just kind of like, there's literally, what is it, like, taking shots for the boys. That's one of the songs. The fuck is the? I have to look it up now. Hold on. But and then on their album Chaos, which was not their most recent album because they came out with another one this year. They tried to take a more, I guess, kind of like stance against like, oh, you're different in school, they're making fun of you, but like their second track, Bulletproof, it kind of talks about like, if you're listening to a song, you may get picked on, but you know, like have them attack me because I'm bulletproof because he doesn't care what, you know, like some high schooler thinks of him. But you know, in the sense of the thing is, it's I think the only reason why it wasn't as accepted is due to the fact of just the rapid transition to like drink beer, smoke weed, fuck strippers, and then immediately like, you know, the next album it's like take care of yourself, don't let people hurt you. So you know it was not quite a smooth transition. So like, you know, as you know, kind of as I said, like you can come out with this one album, and you know when your next album comes out, you're obviously wanting to make some improvements. But if you change too drastically, people don't take too kindly to that. And I guess kind of like another way, you know, another example of that was with Chelsea Grin, because this I started listening to the Ashes to Ashes album, which was one of their not their probably their lowest well received album. It wasn't. Oh, let me put it in a different word. It wasn't well received, but you know it was the first album I started listening to, so I liked it. But what happened was they had this kind of, you know, this heavy sound, these kind of lower vocals. But with Ashes to Ashes, they kind of took this less heavy instrumentation. There was still heavy instrumentation, but it wasn't as heavy as the previous albums.
It was more harmonic.
Yeah, it was much more harmonic. The vocals were much, well, not much higher, but they were more often in the higher range. Yeah, it was mostly the mid to high range. There wasn't a lot of lower vocals.
He wanted to test out how long he could scream at that high pitch range for however long he did that with that.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, and then from that album they came out with, was it Self-Inflicted or Skin Deep? No, Self-Inflicted was the album.
Self-Inflicted was an EP.
You sure?
Right?
No, I'm pretty sure it was. Oh, I gotta look up Chelsea Grin. Don't mind me doing my research. Yeah, Self-Inflicted.
Oh, no, you're right. I'm thinking of Evolve.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so you know, the thing is, you know, the steps from their 2011 album My Damnation, you know, when they came out with their album in 2014, Ashes to Ashes, it took this different step. You know, they wanted to go this different route, but you know the way they kind of did it, I wouldn't say they stepped out too far because the band has every right to go, you know, to take their music wherever they want. Yeah. However, you know, a lot of their following, you know, didn't really like this direction that they took it. So, you know, kind of what they did was they released their next album, 2016, Self-Inflicted, and, you know, it had a lot of the elements of Ashes to Ashes, but it also brought back a lot of the, you know, lower vocals and a heavier instrumentation. So it you know, it kind of combined the two. But, you know, as I said, like, you can never really know until you do it. So, like, you know, they worked on this, you know, they worked on Ashes to Ashes. They thought it was a very good album, and then you know they were taking this different step, but they learned that a lot of people didn't like it, and you know, but like some people did like parts of it, so they stepped in that new direction, but then they also kind of backstepped and incorporated their older elements that a lot of people had, you know, become accustomed to. And again, you know, it's a learning process because I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, but, you know, you don't know how it works until somebody else gives their opinion. Because, you know, I can sit and look at, you know, my music or my edits all day long, and I can nitpick, like, I didn't do this right, I did this wrong, and there could be a part that you thought you did really well on, but then you show it to somebody else, they maybe thought you didn't do so great. So, much like this shitty talk show that I have, I'm just trying to figure out how things go. So if you can bear with me with these first some odd episodes, maybe I'll figure something out.
Trust, we'll figure it out. But
what I will say is, you say we will figure this out, yet no matter what, you're still going to be playing Fortnite. I feel like
fuck you.
Even if I set us up in like a physical office space.
No, if we're in person, it'll be different.
No, you know what'll happen. So, I haven't watched a lot of H3 podcasts, but like, you know how like the more visual based podcasts they have, they'll have like a monitor, so they'll be like, oh, let's, they're talking about something, so they'll pull it up. I feel like you're just gonna be like, oh, I'm in charge of pulling things up, but then Fortnite's just gonna be playing on the screen the whole time. All right. What my goal is with this podcast is, or even just becoming a filmmaker or musician, is like, obviously these are all creative paths that I want to follow, but I kind of want this not fame, but like spotlight, in order to be like, hey, look at all this work I do, but also look at metal, because not a lot of people listen to metal, or they look at it in a very different light, because a lot of people still kind of get rooted in the idea that it's all of it's satanic, or my family is just like, oh, it just sounds like they're throwing up in the microphone. And kind of one of the things that Jared Dines has done recently is he does the, he goes around at a festival and he makes people, he's like, oh, can you, do your best metal scream. And it takes a lot of work. I'm still not exactly where I'd like to be. And I've been working on this since like 2014. So.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. And like Dickie does that too. He's like, oh, I've been doing vocals for like 9 years. Bro.
Yeah. Because, the main argument people make is like, oh, it just sounds like they're throwing up in the microphone, or it's like, that takes no talent. And
exactly.
It's like,
they're like, oh, it's so easy.
Yeah, but it's like, there's, it's very different than, like actually singing, because, you can get into, like damaging your vocal cords if you don't do it right. I mean, you can do that with singing as well, but it's not
as prominent to damage your vocal cords.
Yeah,
like,
because
there's evidence of people in the industry doing that, and then they're making music afterwards, like Austin Carlisle, the fucking Ollie Sykes. There's a bunch of other people I heard the names of, but that's why they're not bands anymore. The guys from it's basically the Hootie of the Blowfish of metal.
Yeah,
but it was
you and me. All right, any closing remarks? But yeah, so I mean, like always, this episode was all over the place. It was mostly kind of, we were kind of trying to talk about our most influential albums, but, we started rambling about other ones, but, that's how most of them are going to go. Hopefully, next episode, I'll try doing a more, I guess, formulaic type. Knocked Loose, we've mentioned in the previous episode. They released their new album August 23rd. I've listened to it. F started listening to it, but he hasn't finished it, so we'll go back, we'll listen to it, and then
then we can review it.
We'll try to do a more easy to follow, not the sporadic me carrying this podcast while he occasionally chimes in after winning a Fortnite battle. Did you get any wins during this episode?
Shut the fuck up.
All right. I asked a simple question.
No, I got points though, but I didn't win.
All right. So get those free V-Bucks, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, guys. In case you haven't noticed.
Shut up! I said we'll see you in the next episode.